Let's look at Chapter 11, Adaptive Leadership. Now, adaptive leadership is the most modern of all the leadership theories that's in the textbook, the newest one, and so it's definitely in style, and I think there's a lot of future for this theory because it has some real strong points to it. So let's talk about what is this adaptive leadership? Well, it's called adaptive leadership because it focuses on the adaptations, the changes that workers need to make in response to changing environments. As things change around us in the world, workers need to change what they're doing. And it stresses the activities of the leaders that optimize the work of the followers in the context that they find themselves. So it's the idea of focus. The leader focuses on the work that the people are supposed to be doing, and he leads in such a way that they can best do the work. So that's the key idea there, is that the leader is helping the workers best do the work in changing environments. So a definition could be the practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and thrive. So this idea of mobilizing people is the idea that adaptive leaders help other people do the work by mobilizing them. It means setting them in motion. Motivating them means giving them the energy to do it. Organizing them is providing them the structure for doing it. Orienting them is sending them off in the right direction, and focusing their attention on what's important so that they stay looking at the job that they're supposed to do. So it's all these things that that a leader can do to mobilize people to face these new challenges and do the work that they're supposed to. Now, part of the adaptive leadership is looking at the different types of situational challenges the workers are facing. There's two types of problems in this framework. There's technical problems or routine problems. Those are problems that are clearly defined with known solutions that can be implemented through existing organizational procedures. These are the things that we deal with every day. For example, suppose that you're working for an accounting firm and there's some new software that isn't working. And if you're an accountant who has the authority to address the problem, for example, contact the software company and have the program modified to meet the company's needs, this is what's known as a technical problem. Calling up the software company, having to make some adjustment, that's something that happens all the time. There's no need for adaptive leadership. You just need to do the work that you know that needs to be done. So that's a technical problem. There's also adaptive challenges. And these are problems that aren't clearly defined or easy to identify and which do not have a clear solution. You can't go through a known process to solve the problem. These type of challenges require innovation and learning. The solutions aren't going to come easily. For example, a hospital wants to begin a hospice care for terminally ill patients. That means they want to have a group that will take care of people where it's certain they're going to die. The patients and their families will face immense uncertainty about how and when the patients will die. The staff, patients, and families will face many questions about the dying process, what loss means, how to prepare for it, how to cope with it, just all kinds of things. So, the challenges facing the organization, in this case wanting to start this whole new division of the hospital, aren't clearly defined, nor are the solutions. Nobody knows how to do this. These challenges require adaptive leadership, innovation, and learning. And in addition, adaptive challenges mean changing the status quo, changing what everybody's been doing to some degree, which means they're value-laden and stir up people's emotions. So things can go really poorly when people's emotions interfere with things. So adaptive leadership is especially concerned with these adaptive challenges in contrast to technical problems or routine problems. Now this figure gives an overview of how adaptive leadership works. There's different situational challenges that people and organizations face. There's the technical challenges, those are the routine challenges that people face. And there's adaptive challenges that require innovation and learning because nobody's ever faced them before. And then sometimes there's a mixture of technical and adaptive challenges. Well, when there's adaptive challenges around, the leader needs to use adaptive leadership. And there's going to be 6 key elements of these adaptive leadership, 6 key behaviors that we're going to look at. And that's going to result in the workers doing what's known as adaptive work. And we'll talk about that too. So we've talked about the different types of situational challenges. Now we're going to look at the 6 leader behaviors that define adaptive leadership. The first one is get on the balcony. Now this is kind of a very figurative statement. The balcony is upstairs looking down on where everybody is. And it's the idea of getting a big picture of everything that's happening in the organization, the challenge that people are facing, things in culture that are affecting people. So it's get on the balcony means you understand the big picture and all that's involved in the situation, which requires a lot of learning, getting lots of new information. Plus, it's removing yourself from the problem a little bit by not taking the problems personally. Because sometimes, if we're honest with ourselves, we're part of the problems. And if we get all emotionally aroused and defensive and upset, that's not going to help it. So we need to be able to look at things objectively. That's getting on the balcony. Secondly, we need to clearly identify these adaptive challenges. First, we need to distinguish between technical and routine problems and adaptive challenges. And the book kind of gives a summary of 4 types of adaptive challenges, all of which are tough to deal with. Suppose there's a gap between the espoused values of the organization, what we say is important, and actual behavior. I work for Christian organizations, and this happens all the time. We're supposed to act like Christ followers and be loving and good, but quite regularly that doesn't happen. And so that's an adaptive challenge when we see that our behavior is not corresponding to our values. Competing commitments or goals. An example is quality versus cost. The higher the quality product that we want to produce, the more it costs, but we've got to keep costs low, but that can lower the quality, and that's a continual struggle that organizations are going to have to deal with whenever there's some type of environmental change. There's what's known as the elephants in the room. Those are problems that everybody knows about, but nobody wants to address because nobody knows what to do with them, because there's egos involved, because there's so many emotions involved. But adaptive leadership is going to say, yeah, we are going to address these challenges in a constructive way. And then a 4th type of adaptive challenge is people avoiding work. People using all of their emotions and relationships to avoid doing what they're supposed to be doing, which, of course, can cause lots of problems for everybody, either addressing the problem or when not addressing the problem. The 3rd adaptive leadership behavior is this idea of regulating distress. An adaptive leader needs to help other people recognize the need for change, but to not be overwhelmed by it. So the leader has to create a safe atmosphere where all the implications of change can be discussed. And this is called a holding environment. That's some of the specialized vocabulary of adaptive behavior, is this holding environment where it's safe to discuss everything. People can ask the really tough questions without being condemned or made fun of or punished for asking the tough questions. And that's not easy for a leader to do because leaders are far from perfect and sometimes they can feel really threatened by questions. So the leader needs to provide direction, protection, orientation, conflict management, productive norms. He or she's got to do everything that he or she can to create this atmosphere that's going to allow the workers to flourish. And he or she's got to watch his or her own personal distress as well as the distress of the workers, keeping everything within the productive range, not going so fast that it starts becoming destructive. Fourthly, the manager, the adaptive leader, needs to maintain disciplined attention. That means encouraging and motivating people to focus on the tough work that they need to do, whether it's an improvement, or a change of some type, a new process, problem solving, but to helping people stay focused on solving the problem. Fifthly, the adaptive leader needs to give the work back to the people. It's not just the leader's brain that's working. Everybody's brain needs to be working on the problems and the work. And so the leader needs to avoid micromanaging, but giving people freedom to solve the problems, to make the process the most effective as they can to get the most work done. And sixthly, and this is closely related to a holding environment, is that the adaptive leader needs to protect leadership voices from below. A lot of times leaders are just so concerned about pleasing their supervisors that all they do is listen to their supervisors. They don't actually listen to the people who are doing the work. Sometimes they're even trampling people that are below them. Sometimes that philosophy is called kiss up and smash people below you. But the adaptive leader needs to protect the voices from below that might provide leadership to the situation. So they need to consider the ideas of people who might blame you for the problems, and they might be right. You need to listen to them. They might be at the fringe of the organization. They might be considered marginalized or even deviant in the group or the organization because they think differently, but they might have some really good ideas. So those are the 6 leadership behaviors. So when there's adaptive challenges that require learning and innovation because you've never faced them before, the organization's never faced them before, there's a need for these adaptive leaders who can do these 6 leadership behaviors, and this results in adaptive work. So what is adaptive work? Well, first of all, it's what leaders want to see happen. It's the goals that everybody's working to. That's the work that needs to get done. And for this to happen, this holding environment, this safe place where everybody can share their ideas and work together on making things better, even when it's really threatening to the worker or to the supervisor, that's where the deeper problems can be solved. And so this adaptive work grows out of the communication between leaders and followers, but it's primarily the work done by the followers. The communication is enabling the followers to work and do the work better. All right, let's look at some of the strengths and some of the criticisms of this approach to leadership. First of all, in contrast to some leadership theories, adaptive leadership takes a process approach. Leadership is this complex transaction between leaders and followers that have these 6 leadership behaviors in them, that none of which are simple. A second strength is that adaptive leadership is follower-centered. It cares about the followers. They mobilize people to do the work and to do the work well. It helps followers deal with conflicting values that emerge in changing work environments. And that's an issue that the other theories haven't dealt with very much, this idea of conflicting values, that everybody's got pressures in different directions, pushing them in different directions, but this creating these safe environments, the holding environment, allows people to deal with them. And these 6 leadership behaviors are really useful. So these ideas, the holding environment, the adaptive challenges, all these concepts here are new compared to the other leadership theories, and they're really important things that should be addressed that will help organizations function better. Now, of course, there are some criticisms, and part of it stems from the fact that this is a fairly new approach to leadership theory. So very little empirical research has been conducted to test the claims of this theory. And part of this reason is that these are complex processes that are hard to define, test, and measure. All of it is somewhat abstract and general, and so that makes simple practical recommendations, things that you can put on your checklist to do, difficult to implement. They're deeper level suggestions, and so that's not an easy type of leadership change to make. Now, at Azusa Pacific University, we're a Christian university, and we like to integrate the material that we're studying and look at from a biblical point of view. And it's interesting because adaptive leadership is very similar to church leadership as described in the Bible, what church leaders should be like. In Ephesians chapter 4, it says, God has given leaders of the church, for what purpose? To prepare God's people for works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up. In a church, the goal of pastors and staff and other leaders isn't to do the work that the church is supposed to be doing. It's to prepare the people in the church to do the work. And it's basically mobilizing and enabling people that want to follow Christ to work together to do what Christ has asked us to do, to love one another and to serve the world.